The sun went down and the jungle fire was burning.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Flip the Script, where we chat with artists, creators, and entrepreneurs about the parallels between advertising and other industries. Today, we're thrilled to welcome Lenny Abrahamson, director of Room, which won the People's Choice Award this year at TIFF. Lenny has directed a number of acclaimed films, including Frank and What Richard Did. Welcome, Lenny.
Thanks for having me. Thank you.
So thanks, Lenny, for taking the time to chat with us today. I'd love to just kick it off and just hear a little bit about yourself. Could you tell us about you?
Well, I'm Irish. I live in Dublin. That's where I grew up. Studied philosophy in university, but started messing around with film when I was there as an undergrad. And then kept doing that really afterwards. Did a bit of postgrad philosophy in the States, but just kept, being drawn back to film. I started making TV commercials. Having made some shorts, started making TV commercials in the kind of late 90s. Did that on and off for about 10 years, maybe even a little longer. And made my first feature film in 2005. And yeah, that's what I've been doing since then.
Awesome. Do you think your career working in commercial production has helped you in your film career?
Yeah, I do. I mean, for me, when I started making shorts, particularly, then I went away, did some more academic work, came back, and I was trying to write and get, I was really wanting to make a film, but it was, that takes time. And I think the thing about directing that is unlike writing is that you can't just go out and do it. I mean, now you can much more than you could then, because equipment's become much cheaper, but then it felt like I just really needed to shoot, and I really needed to shoot stuff in an environment that had that kind of element of pressure and reality that comes when somebody's paying for it, you know? So I thought, I sort of naively thought, I'll make some commercials without realizing that it's a very competitive world. But I was lucky enough to meet a producer who funded a demo commercial, and that went really well. And I started shooting, and I ended up shooting all over the place, and really got a lot out of it. I always think it's, in a number of regards. First of all, there's a huge discipline to it. I mean, just the length requirement, that this will be 30 seconds or 60 seconds, that's a really good skill to learn, to tell a story with that kind of precision so that it will cut to time. And funny enough, now I never time anything, because I think doing commercials has kind of given me a very innate feeling for how a scene is running in terms of pace.
Yeah.
And also dealing with clients and dealing with agency and sort of learning those skills in negotiation, which in the lower budget films aren't so applicable, but as the budgets increase, you once again find yourself in those rooms having those conversations that we all know and love from working in advertising.
Yeah.
And I think finally it's like a boot camp experience. I mean, I did so many commercials that were different in terms of style and flavor and tone, and that's like, it gives you a bit of a workout as a filmmaker. I think it also helped me get some of the kind of filmmaker machismo out of my system, because commercials quite often, made plenty of glossy ones where it was about the camera movement, and it was about it was about that surface, and that's great to do, but it meant that when I went to make my first film, I didn't feel the same impulse that I had to sort of prove myself. I wasn't coming into the first feature going, I'm going to do the whole first half in one shot.
I have to do that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I was able to be a bit lower key.
I want to ask you just about Room. Could you tell us a little bit about the film and how you got involved?
So the film is based on this best-selling novel by Emma Donoghue, who's a resident of London, Ontario. There's a big Canadian connection, because it's also a Canadian co-production, and I shot it here, and I lived here for about 5 months last year, so I kind of have a feeling for Toronto. The book is, it's a really unusual story of a mother and son, and particularly of the kind of, it's a sort of love story about a mother and son, but it's framed in a really unusual context. It starts when the mother has been kept in this single room for a number of years and has had a child. She's been kept by a guy who we see a little of, who kidnapped her. So in other words, it's one of those stories. It's one of the stories that you hear about on the news and wonder what in the hell would that be like. But what's clever about what Emma did is she used that context to really, as a way, not to sort of, satisfy the dark and unpleasant curiosity of an audience. It's not a kind of true crime expose of that. She used it to strip away all of the extraneous things that surround the normal parent-child bond, and in that simplified world and that really pressurized world, it allows you to sort of discover what's really essential for a child, and it also deals with ideas of growing up and entering the bigger world, which all kids have to go through, because and this isn't giving anything away that isn't already widely known. They get out of this room halfway through the film, and so the rest of the film is a study of how they rebuild their lives.
I wanted to ask what it was like to work with Emma. And just sort of your role as a director and her role as a writer. Did you work with her to craft the vision for the film as it was coming to life?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, for me anyway, as a director in features, I think the director's job directing a film begins with working on a script. I mean, and what was great was that when I eventually got into the world of talking with Emma and talking seriously about making the film, she had already written a first draft of the screenplay. She decided, well, somebody's going to come and take this away from me. I'm going to get my retaliation in first, and I'm going to write this thing. And so she said, look, what do you think? And I read it, and it was a really good pass at the novel. And so that was our starting point. But we worked together pretty closely for nearly 2 years. I would come over here, we would meet, sit, talk, rework elements of the structure, endlessly discuss what did and didn't translate in the novel. So it was a very collaborative. And there's a myth, or it's an axiom really in the film industry, which says you should never allow an author to adapt their own novel, because the assumption is going to be they will be uber precious about it. They'll be fighting for every scene, and we all know that films are different, and sometimes you've got to be pretty brutal to make something work. Because I think, and this crosses all, this is true of commercials as well. Stories told in film or on a screen, they're like, it's much closer to music than it is to literature. In other words, time, flow of story, just how like that, to hold an audience is a kind of musical thing. You can't let it drop. Novels can pause, digress, describe, but that sort of through line of whatever tension holds you. So it's a very different thing. But actually Emma we never fought. It was always a positive experience. So I feel like I did an interview a while ago with a newspaper, myself and Emma, and we were talking and laughing, and the guy paused at one point and just said, "Do you realize how rare this is?" Because quite often writers and directors are sort of
at odds,
not the best of friends, shall we say, at the end of the process.
Well, I'm glad it worked out well. I think you can tell with the end result.
Thank you.
You mentioned the sort of the boardroom negotiations.
Yeah.
Obviously a big thing in our world when we have clients and our ideas and doing best for multiple stakeholders.
Yeah.
I noticed that the film has various production stakeholders. It's Irish-Canadian co-production, Telefilm Canada's involved, Irish Film Board. What was it like working with all these different entities? Well,
and there's also A24, the American distributor who pre-bought the rights to distribute in the States, and that was a big part of our funding. And with Film Nation, our brilliant sales agents who are, and Film 4 in the UK as well. Well, I think that the key thing is it's very different. It is very, very different to the way it works in advertising. This is probably going to be the most, in a way, I hope, an interesting conversation for everybody here, because for me, moving from advertising into film there were so many interesting shifts and changes. The first thing is, as a filmmaker, you get to choose, to some extent, you get to choose who it is that's a stakeholder.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, you can invite them in.
So it's not as much of a client services relationship. Now, if you make a studio film, and by that you really just mean one single financier, then it's a little different because they really are. There's a single entity who's in charge of that part. Whereas if you are working with a few, then everybody has to kind of operate in a kind of good faith way, because it's never going to happen. If you ever sort of revert to contract, then you know you've already lost. So everybody, so the key is to choose those people really carefully. First of all, I work with the same producer that I always work with. He's a superb guy called Ed Guy, and he works at Element Pictures in Dublin and London. And I have like an absolutely rock solid relationship with him in that company. And that's a big protection for me. And then Film 4, who will be the next layer, we tend to develop our stuff with Film 4. And here's an interesting thing about the way films work. If you develop, there are two phases to it. There's the development phase and then the production phase. If you go out with your script, just you and the producer, and you go to the big financiers and you say, guys, would you be interested in this thing?
Yeah.
Or this idea, not even a script. Say it's earlier than that, you need the money to write the script.
The pitch.
The pitch. You go out with your pitch to a studio and you say, I'd quite like to make a film about this, or this novel, or this idea. You are effectively inviting them into that to the most delicate part of the process, which is the bit where you work out what the hell it is you want to do with it. So instead of that, the way we work is that we develop internally with a couple of really, really key funders who are really director-driven, namely Film 4. So Film 4 they've had multiple Oscar winners, and they're just a brilliant UK company that doesn't micromanage you. You have in the process of the whole development of a script on that project, maybe you have 6 or 7 meetings. And they never say no. They'll offer their ideas and you'll share yours, right? So once you've got that, and then you have the thing that you know you want to make, then it's safer because you can go out into the big bad world of proper money and go, would you like to make this film? And that's the whole, it really is what it is at that point. And then if they don't want to do it, that's fine, but if they do, they know what it is they're investing in.
It's a stronger thing to get behind because they'll know that this is a real
and also,
real thing.
They can't just say, oh no, we never saw it like that, because at that point you've already got...
You've crafted it into something
exactly.
strong.
Then once you're doing it, I find one thing I learned about in advertising that has served me very well, and I was always brought in for difficult clients. It was sort of my USP, because I'm quite good at making people want to do the things that we want them to do.
Good skill.
It's a really good skill in advertising, which is sometimes it's about having them feel that they own it by just sort of bringing them almost to the idea yourself, and then letting them take that little last tiny step so that they go, yes, that was mine, that was my idea,
I think we could use you around here.
Oh, listen, I tell you, I've often thought I could do sort of pitching and client management seminars, because I'm actually fascinated by it. The other thing I learned was just to not be defensive. Because the one thing, and this has carried me through filmmaking as well, the one thing that happens if somebody comes up with a terrible note, right? So that's the equivalent of, you get your feedback from the client on the script, and they say, the one thing we don't like is X, and you know that X is the actual idea. And that if X is gone, the whole thing falls on its backside, right? The thing to do is not come back and go, no, we disagree. I always go, wow, that's interesting, let me think about that. And I would try and turn it around by saying, well, I can see where the problem is, and maybe if we emphasize this, or I'll say, yeah, I've been thinking the same thing, and actually it is remarkable how people go, he's not trying to put one over on me, he's not trying to force me into anything, and then they sort of relax a little bit, and then they give a little bit more, and then you take that graciously, and then actually suddenly, unless they're totally crazy, and there are those clients, or really, really, I've had those clients where you just want to, kill yourself. but generally speaking, you can get much further by just taking it, like not throwing it back, just take it. In the film context, when I get really bad notes, I tend to just nod and say, that's really interesting, and then do nothing about it, because it isn't, that relationship, that client servicing agency relationship, as I say, unless you're making Avengers, doesn't really apply. And I think I probably had Final Cut on Room, or something like it, which is a sort of fudge, which says both of us have to mutually agree. In other words, neither of us can force it. And that's great, but it's the principles are still the same.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think in the end, think about advertising, think about film. I think everybody just wants to get good work at the end and do something that they can be proud of.
That's right. And if the client doesn't see that what you're trying to do is good for their brand, all you can do is try and help them see it. I mean, it's the only, or make adjustments that don't kill it, but make them feel the love,
Yeah.
I mean, I have to say though that the move for me was really liberating in that I would say on the whole of the shooting of Room, from all those stakeholders, I didn't get one note on the dailies. Over 49 days, and they had access to all the dailies. I didn't get any notes.
Amazing.
And I think the difference is, and probably the trickiest thing about advertising is that ultimately the client is not in the business. The client's in the business of making whatever they make. And therefore, you are dealing with somebody who just does not get, unless you're very lucky.
Yeah.
And that's, marketing departments, I know they're supposed to know stuff. They tend not to really know stuff. They have kind of, I always make a joke about like, I can, and this is terrible, but I can never quite understand what people study when they study marketing. Is it just like, do they do these mantras where my product has a red logo, red is good, red is good, blue, the competitor, bad, no blue in the commercial, blue is terrible, don't shoot the C because that's blue, it's like, but what's good about the film world is that the people in those better companies are a bit more, and they know how the creative process works, and they know that if they try to micromanage it, it never works,
Yeah, I remember when I got my first job in advertising, the first thing I did was I went to the university bookstore to buy a textbook on marketing.
Yeah.
Because I thought that's what I needed to learn. I never read it.
Yeah.
I threw it out.
No.
Because it was just
No.
doing this, and that's how you learn.
Yeah,
So,
exactly.
Well, it sounds like the process of making the film was awesome. I wanted to ask about another thing, which is also big in our ad world, which is recognition and awards.
Yes.
And Room has so far been seemingly quite fortunate with its recognition. Won the People's Choice at TIFF, which is a huge deal.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you how that kind of thing affects the film as you take it to market, because in the ad world, as you know, that helps in in selling and the whole thing.
It has a huge effect. Both, it's like there's two audiences in film. There's the industry audience, and then there's the audience. And you'll often find, as a digression, that an actor that we as people who are interested in the arts and film and stuff will think is huge, and for the industry as a star, isn't actually on the outside. So for quite a long time, Michael Fassbender was like that on every single list that came from the States and the UK on scripts. They'd be saying he would be our top choice. But if you asked anybody outside of our world, they wouldn't necessarily know who he was. So it's a funny thing. But so the awards thing is very important. It is, so the trajectory for most films is that you bring them to the world via key film festivals, right? And the things that come out of those festivals are the things that you put on your poster, are the awards and the reviews. And particularly in a film like Room, which appears to be about something really dark, and is about something really dark, even though it does something different with it, it's so important. Like the People's Choice Award of Toronto is really important, both for the industry, because the industry then goes, audiences like that film. That makes it much easier in terms of getting the industry behind it. Yeah. But also, for an audience, it tells them, maybe I shouldn't be so worried about this, or this seems like something I should see. And it becomes a big part of, like, the releases these days tend to be kind of platformed, which means that you choose a place to bring your film where it can create a little bit of energy. And I always think it's a bit like making, the survival programs where they make fire. Yeah. And the first little spark is the really delicate one that you have to kind of blow on and blow on and blow on, and you hold that until you drop it into the tinder. So the festivals work like that. That's where you start the conversation, and then you leverage that out into the rest of the world. Yeah. But if the film doesn't make an impression at those festivals, it's just that bit harder.
Yeah. Yeah, it seems to be it gives you a little bit of an edge. Which is good.
Absolutely.
I think something that's going to be big with the film as it approaches market is the performances of the cast.
Yeah.
Dynamite cast, great performances from the leads all the way down. Could you talk a little bit about what the process was to cast the film and how you ended up with the actors that you have?
Again, it's also about the quality of the financiers and the companies that you choose to work with, because naive producers and financiers would say, this is a dark film, you know, on the face of it, and it's serious. That's a bit scary. So what we need is a massive star in the lead. Because the conventional thing is that's what's going to bring an audience. But I think what I felt is we just have to cast the right person, because the only way this film will get seen is if it's good. And so I was under no pressure from the financiers to cast somebody really, really huge.
Yeah, cool.
What they were able to tell me was, okay, if you cast somebody at this level, we can raise this money. If you cast somebody at this level, we can raise this money. And in fact, it is unbelievably brutal. A really, really good sales agent, because they're the people who usually will tell you about foreign sales and what the film can be pre-sold for, which is what gives you a lot of your budget. They'll go, she's that amount of money. She is that amount of money. And you think, oh, she's great. And they go, no, not anymore. You think, God, this is so brutal.
Yeah.
I tell you what, I would never be an actor, you know, because that's like, just when you're on the other side of the conversation, just realize how terrible it is.
What a way to sort of evaluate and reduce the talent too, right?
I know. So what I did was we had a list, and we had really interesting people on it for the mother, some more famous, some not so famous. And I met 4 people, and I read them, which was also a thing, because when you're casting well-known actors, the big question is, will they read? Will they audition?
Sure.
And most of the very big ones won't. So what you're doing is you're leaping based on work that they've done already, and a nice cup of coffee that you have with them.
Yeah.
And of course, every actor will say when you ask them, you know, how do you like to work? They will almost always say, whatever way you like to work. And then you get on set and realize that, you know, they're going to beat you to a pulp.
Yeah.
You know, for the duration of the shoot. But Brie has this fabulous warmth, and I saw her in Short Term 12. That's really what made me think about her, and I just had a great conversation with her, and we did work together, and it was good. And then Jake, this little boy, there are people who specialize in casting kids, and they have all these contacts in every urban center and small town across the States and Canada. They would have ways of finding out, well, are there any kids who are interested in acting? And they put out these open calls, and they hold auditions. And so literally hundreds of boys were dragged by their parents or decided they wanted to do it. And out of that, he was just fascinating and amazing little boy. Comes from Vancouver, so another Canadian connection.
Yeah, that's amazing. I want to close off just by talking a little bit about the Canadian connections.
Yes.
So, there's some Canadian production involved. The movie, as you mentioned, you lived here for a few months. It was shot here. What was it like to decide on Toronto as a location, and how it was to live and to shoot here?
Well, it was great, and we had great production partners. A company called No Trace Camping, who have a base here, and we thought about lots of different places, but Toronto really made sense. First of all, it's a really big center for film production, so everything is here. All the studios are here, the infrastructure, the crew. Emma's a Canadian citizen, and that allowed us to do it as an Irish-Canadian co-production, which took advantage of those funds. Toronto doubles so well. I think it must be tricky for Torontonians, because you presumably are always seeing movies that are supposed to be set somewhere, and you're going, oh God, there's the CN Tower, you know.
Well, I was watching it, and I thought it was Toronto, but I was trying to spot.
I'm glad that we managed to at least do a little bit of that.
I think I didn't actually. It didn't clue in until this skating.
Okay, yeah, the skating apps. We said, look, we put this in. Every single Canadian's going to know where we are. Thought, well, we're going to do it. Funny thing was, living here was great. We lived in the beaches, and
great.
And my kids came, my wife came, and we sort of Actually, you know, and my little boy was 7 at that stage, went to school locally, and it was really good. But I remember thinking from August to sort of into October, I thought, wow, this is the most beautiful place I've ever been. The fall, the leaves, the squirrels, the great coffee and ice cream, and I was thinking, why would you live anywhere else? And then the winter came.
Yeah.
And it was like, oh my God, you know? And I remember it seemed to come like in about half an hour. We shot, everybody said, you know, you should really shoot the room part second. You should get the exteriors done first before the weather changes. We decided not to do that because we really wanted to shoot in sequence, particularly for Jake, so that he could make sense of the story and wasn't going to be so chopped up. But that meant that we did all our exterior stuff in, you know, it was like -10.
Yeah.
And I just, wow, I don't know how you guys do it. Do you hibernate or something like that? Or
Spend a lot of time at the office.
Yes.
Well, I'm glad you could make it up to Canada again before the winter comes.
I'm out tomorrow. There's no way I'm hanging on any longer.
All right, good. Well, on behalf of DentsuBos and 360i, I'd like to thank you for your time, Lenny, today. It was amazing to chat. Thank you for your insights.
Pleasure.
And I speak for the team and the group where I say that we all look forward to seeing Room this weekend.
Oh, great. Do go this weekend. It would be a great bonus to everybody. Thanks so much.
Thanks. Thank you. Thanks, Lenny.
Great.
You're gonna love it.